Great. So what I'll do now is I'll start sharing my screen. And this is a website called CS Academy, which I use for teaching Programming 1. It's very graphics based. I can put the link in the chat if you need it. And if you want to, you're welcome to follow along. Carolina, I hope that you follow along. If you logged in, I think you already have the account. I'm going to open up this creative task here in 1.6. And I think I can even make a link to this one as well, if you need it. And what I'm going to do is, this is a place that we can write some Python code here on the left side to draw some shapes. And then we'll see it on the right side in this canvas that we have. So this was a project that I had started, I think, some weeks ago. And all it is, it's a couple of circles. But as you can see, put in the right place, it starts to make a face. So this was some, I think this was supposed to be Morty from the series Rick and Morty, getting started with like the eyes and getting the right color of the skin. For this, I'll actually just start from scratch, and we'll start with a blank slate. So,
and we can do the same thing that you're doing now.
Yeah, if you want to, you can follow along with me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a game, and my game is going to have 3 players. We're going to have, you know, the first one is going to be, or it's going to have 3 characters. The first one is going to be the player, which is controlled by the user. So we'll somehow be able to move around the screen. The next player is going, or the next character is going to be some kind of enemy, which is going to move around randomly in some way. And the last character is going to be some kind of goal or some kind of star to move, that the player will try to get. So you try to get the star, you try to avoid the enemy. And I love this game mechanic because this is practically almost every video game. If you think about like Mario, it's exactly that, except you have gravity and platforms and 2D, or, you know, it's this mechanic can give some really good games. Goal. And this will spawn randomly on the screen. I gave this assignment to some of my students this last spring. So I'll show a couple of their projects so that we get an idea for what this game will kind of look like. If I restart here. So here, if I move with the, with WASD, I'm this little guy that's flying around. And we see, it's pretty hard. We have to avoid this little Flappy Bird guy, and we have to get the goal. And if we touch them, then the game is over. We also see that we have a score counter. We also see that we have some like particles that are kind of flying and actually acting on the enemy. We also have a wraparound for the enemy, but not the player. So this is pretty hard. I can put this also in the chat if anybody wants to play. And then maybe we can look at this one as well. This is going to probably be a little bit similar to what we wind up with. Oh, WASD. What's really nice is when I start, I get some instructions. Using WASD to move the green ball, press any key to start, which is also really good that it's not starting the second that we load the game. Here we go. So now this red ball is actually following me, so it's tracking me, but I can outrun it a little bit. And I think what happens is as the score goes up, I don't have wraparound. As the score goes up, the red ball gets a little faster. So you have this increasing difficulty, which is really fun to play with. So in this kind of game mechanic, there's a lot of different things we can do. Yes. I can also put in this one as well if anyone wants to try. So some of the things here about like the usability, you have a game over screen. Sometimes you also have like a high score screen that you start the game with instructions so the person knows how to play. These are all kind of some concepts in game development. So as we get started, I'm going to show a little bit of how we can program this, but then I'll also take advice from both of you to get input for how we actually want to make the game, because there's lots of decisions we can make. The first thing we can do is think of a shape that we want our player to be. We could be a square, we could be an oval, we could even download a picture from the internet and use a little picture if we want to do that. Carolina, do you have any ideas?
I was thinking, but I like circles, so I would want to have a circle.
So what we'll do is we'll start off with a circle. We'll put
Yeah.
this in the middle of the screen, the center X and the center Y at 200, 200. Since we're a circle, we have a radius. Maybe we'll start off with a radius of 25. Maybe that's okay. And do you have a favorite color?
Blue or green?
Blue or green? What I can do is I can make a gradient
Ooh.
from blue to green. And I won't go over all of the little details of how to like putting this gradient command in here. But if we run the code like this, we see that we get an error. The gradient is not defined. Did you mean gradient with a small g? Oh, maybe it is a small g. Nice.
Cool.
So now we have a circle with green on the outside, blue on the inside. I think that's pretty. Or do we want green on the inside?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's nice. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to move this circle around. To do that, we're going to use something called a variable. So we have this circle and we want to be able to change the position of it. How we're going to do that is we're going to kind of save this circle to a variable that then we can change the position of. So the name of my variable is going to be player. I could call this anything I want. It could be player one, it could be me, it could be person, it could be any name I want. This is where I can be as creative and let my my inner expression come out into my program. So we take the circle that we had before, we use an equal sign to assign it to a variable. If I run my program again, which is a good idea because I want to run my program pretty often. If I write a little bit of code, I want to run it and make sure I don't have an error like how I had before with the gradient. I see that everything is fine. But I can hit space or the arrow keys on my computer. Oops. And nothing happens. So this my circle is not moving around yet. And that's because I haven't written the code to do that. So to move the circle around, we're going to use a function. We're going to use a function that's built in to this graphics package. And it's going to look like this. We'll say def, which is like the function declaration in Python. And it's going to be on key press. On key press is the name of the function that we're going to use. And it has to be spelled exactly like this, case sensitive. So a little case O, a capital K, and a capital P. This is called camel case. We need to have two parentheses, an opening and a closing parenthesis after that with a semicolon at the end. In between the two parentheses, we're going to have a key, which is going to be the variable that holds the key that we press down. So if we hold down A, or if we hold down the left arrow key, this is how we're going to, this is going to be the variable that's going to tell us which key we hit down. So just for a little bit of a test, I can use this print statement, which is a debugging thing that we have in Python, and I can print out the key. So now if I run my program and I hit A, I'll see down here on this in this debugging console, which I pulled up by grabbing this little slider here. When I hit A, I see A. A is printed out. If I hit W, WASD, if I hit the left arrow key, I get the text left. Up, down, left, oh, right. Mash all of the keys and I can see space and backspace. So what I've done now is I've written a function which can tell me which key I'm pressing. So now what we want to do is we want to hook this up so that we can move the position of this circle around. What do you think, Carolina? Should we use WASD or do you want to use arrow keys?
I'm more of an arrow key person.
Arrow keys.
Yeah.
Great. So if we're going to use the arrow keys, we need to be able to ask a question in our Python program. We need to be able to express logically, okay, if I hit the left arrow key, then I need to move my circle to the left. And the key word here is if, which is the keyword that we'll use in Python. So I'll write if space key is, I need to express this way of if the key is left, if it has the value of left. And in Python, we do that with 2 equal signs. So we have a double equal sign, and then we're going to have the text left in apostrophes. And this is where programming gets pretty complicated, because in Python, the difference between, having 2 equal signs or having text in apostrophes is really important. Also, something that's really important is that we have to have indentation on this first line. So on line 13, I have a tab, which gives me some space. And what this is telling me is this is actually this line 12 and line 13, since these are indented in, since there's space at the beginning of the line, these are part of this on key press function. So if I run my code now, I'll see that something not great happens. I get an error. Errors are totally fine, and this happens in programming all the time. So if I read the error, it says syntax error at line 13. Expected, and then I have here, it's a apostrophe with a colon in it. And then on the line after, it has the line 13 and a little arrow that says, hey, you're missing something here. And what I'm missing here is the colon at the end of the line, which is something that you always need to have when programming in Python and using an if statement. If I put that in, I can try to run again, and I still get an error. Syntax error on line 15 now. Now it says expected an indentation block after if statement. This is a little bit tricky the first time that you look at it. What's happening here is we've written an incomplete piece of code. We've started writing this logical kind of thing of moving this circle to the left, but we haven't finished. It's kind of like a sentence fragment. We've said, well, if the key is equal to left, and we haven't given a follow-up instruction, so the program doesn't know what to do. So in this case, we want to write the code to move the circle to the left, and this is going to look like this. We're going to take our variable player, we're going to use a dot, and then we're going to access a property of this variable called center x, because we want to change the x value. The center x starts off at 200, and if we hit left, we want to make it smaller. The way that the canvas is set up, we want to make this value decrease. So what we're going to do in Python is we're going to use a little nifty shortcut called minus equals. And maybe we'll just do, let's try 5 pixels. So every one time I hit the left arrow key, we're going to move the circle 5 to the left. So if I run this now, I see that I don't get any errors. And if I hit the left arrow key, oh, and I also had to click into the canvas to make sure that I have it selected. And now when I hit left, I see that my circle moves. That's pretty good. Yeah, woo. So this was only one direction. I want to be able to move a couple more directions. So I'm going to put in the code for this as well. And this is going to look very similar to the 2 lines of code that I had written, that I wrote before. If the key is equal to the right, colon, enter. When I hit enter, I automatically get this the cursor at the right place. If I forget the colon and then I hit enter, I wind up in the wrong place. So it's really important to remember the colon, and this is something that my students always forget, and things wind up in wrong indentation places, and they say, Mr. Snider, my program is not working, but it has done exactly what it has been told to do. So colon, player, dot, center, X. Here we're going to do plus equals. Plus equals 5. Now that I've written another like encapsulated, like another like finished piece of code, I can run again, and I'm going to test this. So now I can move to the left, and I should be able to move to the right. And I think that is pretty good.
Okay, I know it's silly, but to me, this is like super much progress. I haven't coded that much in Python, so to me, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks. So if we want to hit up, then we're going to change the center Y, and we're going to make the center Y smaller, which might be a little bit hard to understand, but the way that the canvas is laid out, we have 0, 0 in this top corner here. So just trust me. If key, and then the last one is going to be down. And then we want our player to move down. So we're going to add. So now I've written about 20 lines of code in the all in all, including the comments. And now I can move my guy around on the screen. That's pretty good. It's a little bit button clicky, so I have to really like tap the buttons a lot to get it to work. And I could fix that later by writing some more code, but I think we'll leave it like that for now. So right now, I think that's done with my first one. This is pretty much done. I think I can put like this, done. Now I'm going to work on an enemy. I'm feeling a square for the enemy. I think that's going to be pretty good. And so here we're going to follow the same kind of procedure that we had before. We're going to make a variable called enemy. And here I'm going to make it's actually going to be a rectangle. The rectangle should have, yes?
A question, in Python, you always have the variables at the top. Is that like best practice?
For this example now, when we're doing this like graphics package, that's usually a good way when we're making little games to have the variables at the top, which you might technically not need to do, but it makes it a little easier if you structure your code. I'm going to start this guy in the top left corner. So we're going to start at like 20, 20. Whoops. And if the circle's radius is 25, that means the diameter is 50. So maybe we'll make it the same size as the player. So we'll have 50 and 50 again. And that gives me this black square here. Even though it's called a rectangle and I'm using this rectangle command to create this, I have made the width and the height the same. So it's so we can call it a square. Any advice for colors?
Pink.
Pink. A very scary enemy. Can we do a darker pink? No. That's good enough. So here we want our enemy to kind of move around. We want the enemy to move around to try to kind of chase us so that we have to avoid. There's a lot of different ways to do this in programming. And I think the easiest way, we'll do something like, I mean, we could just make him go back and forth. I think what we'll do is we'll have him move in one direction and then bounce off the corners.
That's a good effect.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So to do this, we're going to use another function. This function is going to be called onStep. This is also a built-in function. So it's important that we have a lowercase o and a capital S. And in this onStep function, we don't have anything in between the parentheses. If I run my program now, I see that I get an error. And once again, errors are totally fine. Errors happen all the time in programming. When you get an error, take a breath, take a look at it. Yeah, pat yourself on the shoulder and look at it and say, okay, what did I do? Expected an indented block after function definition. Okay, so here I've done the same thing again. I've kind of written like a sentence fragment. I haven't really finished my thought in my program. I've said, okay, we're going to have this function in onStep, and inside onStep, we're just kind of left hanging. Python doesn't know what to do. So the easiest thing I can do here is I can actually use a little cheat. I can put the keyword pass in here. So pass just says don't do anything. So now if I run, now I can see that this is, I've fixed this now. But what I really want to do is I want to move this enemy. So this enemy has a center X and a center Y, just like our circle. So let's see if we can do like this. Enemy dot center X. Let's do plus equals. Let's make it a little bit slower than the circle. Maybe let's do 2. Aha. Now we're getting somewhere. Carolina's like, what? So with one line of code, we can make our enemy move to the right. But when it hits the wall now, it just keeps going, and it's still going, and it has not really paid attention to the border which we see. Another thing I can do is I can change the center Y as well if we want to make it move diagonally. No, it's still plus. So if we move the X and the Y coordinate at the same time, now we're moving diagonally. Right now, the enemy is hitting the player, but it's not doing anything because we haven't written that code. Yeah, it's pretty good so far. So what I want to be able to do now is if our enemy hits the box, if it kind of hits the wall, I need to be able to, I want to be able to bounce. I want to be able to go the other way. This is not a super easy problem to solve, actually. And the way that I've written this program here, it could be pretty difficult. I know that what I need to do is have something like if the enemy dot center X. Well, if this center X, the left, this wall here, when X becomes really big, if the center X is greater than 400, well, then this is where we want to do something. This is where we want to bounce. We want to go the other way. The same thing if we go off the bottom here, if the center Y becomes too big. We also, here, if we bounce here, we want to go the other way. We want to go to the left. Actually, we want to bounce left if we hit the right wall. Here we want to bounce up. What do you think, Carolina? Do you have any ideas of how we could fix this?
I'm trying to like, I've been, last week I was a code mentor for kids and we taught them games in Scratch so for like this workshop for me now is like, I'm doing what I taught the kids, but I'm doing it in Python. Oh my God. But I'm trying to think. I actually don't know. What do you think? How to solve it? Or
Yeah,
is it spelling error as well? Sorry. On
ooh,
line
aha,
18.
nice.
Yeah.
And I think if I run this, I also get, yeah, so right now, since I've left these comments in here, we have these not complete code statements. So if I try to run this now, I can't just tell Python what I want it to do in the comment. I have to write some code. The way that I usually see students try to solve stuff like this is they would do something like this. They know that, okay, well, if the center X is too big, well, then I need to go the other way. I need to do minus equals, you know, if center X is greater than 400, then we want to make center X smaller again. The same thing with center Y. Okay, if we go more than 400, okay, then we want to go the other way. And this, I mean, if we look at this, we can kind of follow what's going to be going on, or what we would think would want to happen. But when we run the code, I think this will look a little bit strange when we get there. Aha. So what's happened now is we just stop.
Could you also, because I know a lot of the kids with Scratch games, they had like a border on their screen, and the border was like 2 pixels black color, and if something hit that border, then
Yeah, you have this
X and Y should be this, for instance.
Yeah,
Did you do something like that, or is that?
And
like
in Scratch, that's exactly what we want to do. In Scratch, they have I think they have one block for that, and it's just bounce if you hit. This here, we're not so lucky. We have to do it manually. So how we're going to fix this actually is we're going to keep track of the change in X and the change in Y. If students that go into like more advanced math classes, they look at derivatives, which can be the change in position. And that's the thing that we need to use here. So we're going to create some variables. Actually, we're going to create some properties as a part of this enemy. So here, the enemy, I'm going to make a variable called dx, which is how much X is going to change. And here I'm going to make this be equal to 2. I'm going to make another property. It's not quite its own variable. It looks a little bit like a variable, but really it's a kind of a variable that exists inside this enemy variable that we have. This is getting into something called object-oriented programming, and is not a super programming 1 or a first day programming concept. But what we can do here is, now that we've kind of saved these values, we can use them. So instead of changing center X by 2 down here, we can change center X by whatever we want to change center X by. Enemy.dx, enemy.dy. What I'm doing here is actually refactoring. I'm writing some code, then changing it to kind of get it to do what I want. I think I can run this now, and I think we'll still get the rectangle moving. And then it should still stop. So I think I know what's going on here. So now that we've saved these values in a variable, we can do this stutsa. We can do this kind of reversing. So when I go over the boundary, if my center X is greater than 400 or my center Y is greater than 400, I don't really want to change the center X. I want to change the change. I want to change the dx. And instead of making dx be +2, I want it to be -2. And the same thing if I get greater with, actually, I'm going to take, let's do this with just X first. I'll take this, we'll get this working in one direction first. So I'm just going to put in some comments here. So now we should just be moving to the right. And when we hit the right, when the center of the enemy hits the boundary, then we go the other way. But now we have the other problem. When we run, we can hit the right wall and we go the other way. But then when we hit the left wall, we don't have anything that gets us back to that positive change in direction. So now we're just always going the other way. So we need to write a little bit more code. And we can write some code that looks like this. If enemy.center X is less than 0. Whew, and I almost forgot a colon there. If the center X is less than 0, then we want the oof, and now I have caps locks on. That's what happens. Enemy.dx. Yeah, you're laughing, Carolina. You know what this life is like. Oop. So if we hit the left wall, then we bounce to the right. And here we're changing the direction of X and the direction, actually just the direction of X now. This is very satisfying. So I'll put in the code for changing the Y as well, so we don't just have our enemy hanging out at the top of the screen. So if the enemy.centerY is greater than 400, then we'll have the dy be equal to -2. And if enemy.center Y is less than 0, I forgot a colon again, enemy.dy is equal to 2. So I think now we should have, if we're lucky, we should be able to bounce back and forth. Nice. And I know from doing this, right now we're bouncing perfectly from one corner to the other. But if I make, if I change the size of this square actually, or if I change the position of it, if I put it at maybe something that's not so symmetrical, 80, 130, maybe. So no, maybe something a little less. So now if I angle it a little bit, now we have a kind of nice, it won't always bounce on the same track. It'll kind of hit the walls and do this screensaver thing.
This is so cool. I know I'm like a kid, but I think this is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is really like super foundations of programming here and foundations of game design. I already have a little game now, if I use my imagination, of just kind of avoiding the enemy. And even though I haven't written the code to make the game end, that doesn't stop me from trying to avoid it. So we have just a couple minutes left. I don't know if we might not get all the way to the end of making everything that I wanted, but I think we got off to a good start. Should we do the collision of the enemy and the player, or should we make this little goal the star that we want to jump around and try to catch?
I would like to see the collision.
Sorry?
The collision between, like, if you hit the enemy, what happens?
Sure. So this piece of code that we want to check if the enemy hits the player, or conversely, if the player hits the enemy. Where we're going to put that logic is we want this to be in our game loop. We want this to be in our onStep function. OnStep is the function that drives every animation, every frame. Right now, by default, we have 30 frames per second. So every second, I think, is it every second we're moving? No, it couldn't be that we're moving 60 pixels every second. Maybe we're just moving. Actually, it is. I mean, if I put in here print.
So print is like a way of checking things in Python.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a good tool to use.
Yeah, it's really great. So here I can see how the X coordinate is changing. And we could play with the speed. We could make it faster. We could make it slower. But the logic of the collision, we want to have in this onStep function. So what I'll do is I'll put this after all of my enemy movement code. I'll write some code that looks like this. If enemy dot, and we have a special function for doing this, hits shape. This is going to make things a heck of a lot easier for us. We're using a built-in method from this object. If the enemy hits the player, then we want to do something, maybe we'll want to stop the game. So we do app.paused is equal to true. And then maybe we make some text. We can make text on the screen with a command called label. And we can do something like game over. And then I think we need like a position as well. So I think those 3 lines of code is actually what we want. And here we can see you have this little overlap, and then we have game over. And if we want to make this bigger, I think we can do size is 48. Yep. And I actually like that. I think that's pretty good. So, and if we wanted to add to this game, we could put in a little star and then have to chase the star around while avoiding. And then maybe we do something like we keep track of like how many stars we get, and then we try to make a high score. Or you could have some winning condition, so you actually win the game if you get 10 stars. We could add increasing difficulty where, like, as you get more stars, maybe the size of the player increases or decreases, or the speed of the enemy increases. Yeah, so this is a lot about being able to program, being able to be creative, thinking of some game that you would like to create on your own, and actually kind of bringing it into existence.
It feels like the next game I want to do now is like a Pong game.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. This was so cool.
Yeah,
I just played a game in like 40 minutes.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm really happy to share.
Thank you so much. And we have access to this website, so we can continue and practice all of the resources and like code your own games. That's really cool. Thank you so much, Johan, for showing us this.
Yeah, tack själv. And I actually have to I have to run now, so I will
You do
say
that.
have a nice rest of the day.